Commerce Alive Today presents
Duckwall ALCO. Duckwall ALCO traced its roots to humble and rural beginnings, back to the first store opened by the company's entrepreneurial founder, A.L. Duckwall. Senior Duckwall laid the foundation for an enterprise that would endure for more than a century when he spent $400 in 1901 to establish the Racket Store. A variety merchandise store, Duckwall's first retail creation offered a little bit of everything, according to its owner, presenting the store's farmland customers with an array of goods from which they had rarely had the luxury to choose. This premise set the theme for subsequent stores established in the following decades. The generations of leadership that followed in Duckwall's wake continued to target rural communities deprived of the diversity of merchandise to which their urban counterparts had become accustomed. In the decades following the success of the Racket Store, a steady stream of variety stores was established in rural communities, each operating under the Duckwall banner. The concept, and the series of new stores that presented the concept to eager rural customers, proved to be an encouraging success, able to surmount the economic vagaries of the first half of the 20th century and adapt to the changing consumer tastes of the years. By the end of the 1960s, after 6 decades of tapping rural demand for a potpourri of goods, there were 100 Duckwall variety stores situated in the Midwest, positioned in rural towns with populations ranging between 2,000 and 10,000. The late 1960s marked a signal turning point in the business established by A.L. Duckwall, Sr., a defining transition that was overseen by his son, A.L. Duckwall Jr. By 1968 the company had opened its first ALCO discount store. Although the opening of the first discount-oriented store did not drastically alter the heart of the company's strategic philosophy of catering to rural customers, it did represent a decided shift toward a new merchandising strategy. The success of the first ALCO store heralded the birth of a new, stronger retail breed and sounded the death knell for Duckwall's variety store concept. During the 7 decades separating the beginning of the 1970s and the era in which Duckwall had opened his first store, the dynamics of operating a retail business in a rural setting had changed considerably. The modern rural customer had become accustomed to a broad selection of merchandise as large national chains moved into smaller communities. Accordingly, price became the leverage point for any retail business hoping to succeed against much larger competition. Duckwall ALCO, operating under its new corporate name, had changed with the times. During the early 1980s, Duckwall ALCO was best known as a rurally oriented retail chain based in the birthplace of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. It was also known and quickly disregarded by those on Wall Street, a company suffering from anemic financial performance. In 1981, for instance, sales increased a paltry 1%, as profits slid precipitously by 24%. As one analyst noted at the time, in reference to Duckwall ALCO's regard among investors, it was an ignored stock for a long time. Caught in the grip of pernicious economic recession, Duckwall ALCO executives were grappling to find a solution and end the trauma. Their salvation was found through an important acquisition, completed just as the company's financial standing was becoming precarious. In May 1983, in a deal brokered with a handshake in February, Duckwall ALCO acquired Sterling Stores Company Incorporated, the parent company of a 48-store discount chain based in Little Rock, Arkansas, that operated under the name Magic Mart. Its inclusion within Duckwall ALCO's fold was the remedy for which company executives were searching, quickly effecting an about-turn in Duckwall ALCO's financial performance. The Magic Mart chain, which generated $111.6 million in revenues in 1982, was credited for the robust increase in Duckwall ALCO's financial totals, arresting what threatened to be a damaging slide and restoring to its new owner the solid financial state it historically had enjoyed. 2 years after watching profits sink 24%, Duckwall ALCO's stock price more than tripled. In 1983, sales swelled to $317 million, up nearly 50% from the previous year's total. The company's profits accomplished an even more dramatic leap, nearly doubling to $8.6 million. By all measures, the company once again stood as a solid performer, piquing the interest of Wall Street and earning the respect of other similarly sized retailers competing for the business of rural consumers. Buoyed by the resurgence realized from the Sterling/Magic Mart acquisition, Duckwall ALCO made another move on the acquisition front a short time later. In January 1984, the company purchased 4 discount stores in Wichita, Kansas, operating under the David's banner. 1 year later, Duckwall ALCO completed another acquisition, acquiring 9 stores from the Illinois-based Hornsby chain. The acquisitions were indicative of the optimism pervading Duckwall ALCO's corporate offices, the same optimism that prompted a management-led leveraged buyout of the company in 1985. A.L. Duckwall Jr., the last member of the founding family to head the business, had decided to retire at roughly the same time an investment firm, E.F. Hutton LBO, approached Duckwall ALCO's president, Robert Sowelter, about initiating the buyout. Planning to include as many as 57 ALCO managers in the buyout group, Sowelter pushed ahead with the deal, completing the purchase of the company in September 1985. At this point there were 127 ALCO discount department stores in operation in 14 states, complemented by 33 Duckwall variety stores operating in a 4-state territory. The strength of the company resided in its ALCO units, which served as one-stop shopping destinations situated in markets too small to support specialty stores. Slightly less than 3 years after the management-led buyout, Sowelter retired, paving the way for the promotion of Glenn Shank, a Duckwall ALCO employee since 1973 and merchandising vice president for the previous 8 years. To Shank, who would guide the company through the 1990s, fell the unenviable responsibility of announcing Duckwall ALCO's most devastating news in its nearly 90-year history. In May 1989, Duckwall ALCO, the promising and vibrant discount retailer of the early and mid-1980s, filed for Chapter 11 protection, a last-ditch effort to stave off deleterious financial losses. Duckwall ALCO's darkest hour had not arrived suddenly. Between 1986 and early 1989 the company had closed 20 stores, as poor profit performance at a number of the stores forced closures. By 1989 the piecemeal elimination of unprofitable stores was no longer an option. The financial losses racked up by dozens of stores had become too severe. Wholesale changes were desperately needed, and Shank, who barely had time to settle into his new position at Duckwall ALCO, was the central figure responsible for devising what those sweeping changes needed to be. The root of the problem, ironically, was the source of Duckwall ALCO's strident growth during the early and mid-1980s. The 3 acquisitions the company had completed between May 1983 and January 1985 had done much to revitalize Duckwall ALCO's financial health, but the absorption of the acquired stores had also created serious problems. Magic Mart, the greatest savior of the 3 acquisitions, also ranked as the biggest culprit, bringing the company in close competition with giant national discount chains such as Arkansas-based Walmart. Prior to the acquisition of the Magic Mart chain, Duckwall ALCO had competed directly against Walmart in 6 of its markets. After the acquisition, Duckwall ALCO was positioned in close proximity to Walmart in 40 new markets. The results were disastrous. Duckwall ALCO could not compete effectively against the far more financially powerful Walmart, as consumers flocked to the larger stores operated by the behemoth Arkansas retailer. By the time the company filed for Chapter 11, it had identified 52 of its worst-performing stores, units that registered $10 million in losses in 1988 alone. The stores were scattered throughout a 10-state territory and included many of the units acquired from Magic Mart, David's, and Hornsby. On May 15, 1989, all 52 of the stores were closed, stripping the company of 1/3 of its store count. Next began the arduous task of developing a reorganization plan, as Shank labored to find a solution that would appease creditors and enable Duckwall ALCO to emerge from under the protective umbrella of Chapter 11. For 2 years the reorganization process dragged on until at last Duckwall ALCO received approval to begin anew in 1991. The road back to a healthy and promising future was a difficult course to travel, and it did not progress quickly. After Chapter 11, it took roughly 2 years before company officials could point to anything that suggested a return to consistent prosperity. The first solid sign arrived in 1993, when Duckwall ALCO posted a heartening $2.3 million in earnings. The next positive development occurred in the fall of 1994, when the company completed a successful initial public offering of stock. With the proceeds gained from the company's stock offering, it entered 1995 with the best opportunity it had seen in years for a full revival. Optimism had returned to the company's headquarters in Abilene. As proof of the bright outlook Duckwall ALCO officials embraced, the company announced it would open 20 stores a year as it entered 1995. Planning to open 3 ALCO discount stores for every 2 Duckwall variety stores it opened, the company was employing the strategy it had devised to compete against larger discounters and to protect itself from the profit erosion that had signaled its near collapse in 1989. Duckwall ALCO executives resolved to establish new stores in the smallest of rural communities, reducing its maximum population base for a store to fewer than 16,000 residents in a particular market and fewer than 5,000 residents in a targeted town. The plan placed a new emphasis on the once forsaken Duckwall format. Further, it was a preemptive expansion strategy predicated on avoiding competition rather than meeting other regional discounters head-on. By opening a store in a location that met the company's population criteria, Duckwall ALCO established a presence that discouraged other, similarly sized discount retailers from encroachment and positioned it in markets largely ignored by heavyweights such as Walmart. The operating strategy developed by A.L. Duckwall, Sr. in 1901 had been fine-tuned for the 1990s. To the relief of anxious Duckwall ALCO executives, the strategy worked. Financial health returned to the company, with a consistency and strength that suggested a complete turnaround from the troubled late 1980s and early 1990s. Moreover, optimistic expectations for the future were buttressed by the identification of more than 100 locations that were understored in markets matching the company's demographic criteria. Accordingly, expansion pushed ahead as the company moved into the late 1990s and neared its centennial. In September 1996, Duckwall ALCO acquired 14 retail locations from Newcastle, Indiana-based Val Corporation, which added stores located in eastern Indiana and western Ohio. The acquired stores were remodeled as ALCO units and reopened in early 1997, accelerating the company's previously announced expansion pace. In November 1997, Duckwall ALCO acquired 18 stores located in Texas and New Mexico from Perry Brothers Incorporated, which debuted as Duckwall units in early 1998. On this note, with the pace of expansion exceeding expectations and the company's financial growth pointing to a healthy enterprise, Duckwall ALCO prepared for the century ahead and the coming celebration of its 100th year of business. As it had been since 1901, Duckwall ALCO was firmly rooted in the rural communities of America. The company previously experimented with a combination discount and food store called COLA Cost of Living Adjusters in Mineral Wells, Texas, which was discontinued. The company also began a supercenter concept, ALCO Marketplace, by providing limited perishable goods. These stores were considerably smaller than Walmart's or Target's supercenter stores. Duckwall ALCO Stores announced on November 29, 2010, the closure of all 44 of its Duckwall stores, thus ending the Duckwall name. The store in Hettinger, North Dakota, was reopened as an ALCO while the remaining 43 stores permanently closed. Subsequently, the chain dropped the Duckwall name and renamed itself simply as ALCO Stores Incorporated. In the fall of 2011, ALCO Stores opened its first store in the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex suburb of Grand Prairie, Texas, but closed the store in May 2014 due to lackluster sales. On April 10, 2013, ALCO Stores Incorporated moved its corporate headquarters from Abilene, Kansas, to Coppell, Texas. On October 12, 2014, ALCO Stores Incorporated filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy citing increased competition and declining consumer and business confidence, which has led to decreased customer traffic and reduced levels of consumer spending, particularly on discretionary items. On November 17, bidding on the company through bankruptcy court ended with a liquidation firm joint venture, which provided a stalking horse bid and the only bid received by the court, being approved as the new owner. Going out of business sales at all locations started on November 21, 2014. The last ALCO store closed in March 2015. 20 locations were acquired by Shopko, and were converted into Shopko hometown stores. Those locations closed permanently after Shopko filed for bankruptcy in 2019. Baumgars took over 12 former locations. Orscheln Farm and Home acquired ALCO's former distribution center in Abilene, Kansas. Other locations were acquired by various entities, either before closure or afterwards.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and like.